The house with 2 pizza boxes. I've been delivering pizzas for about 3 months now. Most nights are pretty standard. Drop off food, get a tip, move on to the next one. But this one Saturday night during a storm, I delivered to a house I'll never forget. I turned 17 just a couple months before getting this job. It seemed like one of the easier gigs, you know? Better than standing around behind a counter being bored all day. The pay wasn't amazing, but tips were decent, and I got to drive around listening to music. Can't really complain about that. This particular Saturday, the weather was awful. There was this massive storm overhead, rain coming down in sheets, wind howling. You'd think that would mean a slow night, but it was actually the opposite. People didn't want to go out in that mess, so they ordered delivery instead. We were slammed from like 6 o'clock all the way until almost midnight. I was running deliveries back to back, barely had time to catch my breath between orders. The other delivery driver, this guy in his 30s named Mike, had been hanging around the shop for over an hour just talking to the managers. But of course, when the next order came in around 11:30, they sent me. I grabbed the receipt and the pizza, large pepperoni, nothing special, and punched the address into my phone's GPS. The street name didn't ring a bell, which wasn't unusual. I'd only been doing this for 3 months, and our delivery area was pretty big. The GPS said it was about 20 minutes away, out in one of those suburban neighborhoods where the houses sit way back from the road. I figured I'd drop it off, then maybe take the long way back to kill some time. It was getting close to closing anyway, and I didn't want to get stuck doing another delivery right before we shut down. The drive out there was kind of eerie, honestly. By that time of night, there was basically nobody on the roads. Just me, the rain hammering my windshield and my headlights cutting through the darkness. I actually usually find that kind of calming, the empty roads, the late-night vibe. But that night with the storm and everything, it felt different, heavier somehow. The neighborhood I pulled into was exactly what I expected. Mostly wooded, with these long driveways snaking back through the trees to houses you could barely see from the street. Nothing too secluded for our area, but definitely isolated enough that you wouldn't hear your neighbors or anything. I turned down the driveway the GPS told me to. It was longer than most, winding back through tall trees that blocked out what little moonlight there was. My headlights bounced off the wet pavement and the tree trunks as I drove. When I finally reached the end, I parked in front of this big old house. And I mean old, it had that look, you know, like it had been standing there for decades. 2 stories kind of run down with peeling paint I could barely make out in the darkness. But here's the thing that immediately struck me as weird. There wasn't a single light on, not one. The whole place was completely dark. Now that's not totally unusual. Sometimes people are upstairs or in the back of the house and they don't bother turning on the porch light. But this felt different. The darkness seemed total, like the house was abandoned or something. I grabbed the pizza and was about to get out when I saw it, movement in one of the upstairs windows. Just a quick shift of the curtain, like someone had been standing there watching me pull up and then ducked back when they realized I'd noticed. I see that kind of thing a lot, actually. People watching from windows when deliveries arrive. Makes sense. They want to know when their food gets there. But something about this one creeped me out. Maybe it was because I couldn't actually see the person since it was so dark inside. Just that curtain moving and then going still. I shook it off and got out of the car, hunching against the rain as I jogged toward the porch. That's when I saw the second pizza box. It was sitting right there on the porch, just left on the ground near the door. But it wasn't from our shop. I could see the logo from a different place in town, this local joint I'd heard of but never been to. The box was completely soggy, like it had been sitting out in the rain for a while. Water had soaked through the cardboard and it was starting to fall apart. I stopped and stared at it for a second. That was weird, right? Why would there be another pizza box just sitting there? I looked around, checking to see if maybe another delivery driver had just left. But there were no cars pulling away, no taillights disappearing down the driveway. And the box was too wet to have just been dropped off. It had clearly been there for at least 20 or 30 minutes, maybe longer. My brain was trying to make sense of it. Maybe they'd ordered from both places by accident, or maybe someone else in the house ordered separately. But then why wouldn't they bring the first one inside? I stepped around the soggy box and walked up to the front door. I needed to get paid, so I couldn't just leave the pizza and bail. I knocked 3 solid raps on the door. Immediately, I heard something shift inside the house. Like someone moving, maybe standing up from a chair or taking a step. But then nothing, complete silence. I waited a full minute, rain dripping down my neck, getting more uncomfortable by the second. Still nothing. I knocked again, harder this time. Silence. Okay, this was getting annoying. I knew someone was in there. I'd seen the curtain move, and I definitely heard someone after my first knock. Why weren't they answering? I pulled out my phone and called the number on the order. Maybe they couldn't hear me knocking over the rain or something. A few seconds later, I heard it. A phone ringing inside the house. And not just anywhere inside, it sounded like it was right on the other side of the door. Like literally a few feet away from me on the other side of that wood. Someone was standing right there. The phone rang and rang 6, 7 times. I could hear it perfectly clearly, but nobody picked up. My heart started beating faster. This was getting really weird now. Why would someone be standing right behind the door, phone in hand, and just not answer, not open the door, not say anything? The ringing finally stopped, going to voicemail. I stood there, soaking wet, staring at the door. I could feel it, you know. That sensation you get when you know someone's watching you, even if you can't see them. Someone was on the other side of that door, and they were just waiting. Then, finally, a voice came through the door. A woman's voice, but it sounded wrong. Harsh and gravelly, like she'd been smoking for 40 years or had a really bad cold. Doors broken, bring it around to the side porch. That was it. No sorry for the wait or thanks or anything. Just that one sentence and then silence again. I took a step back, my mind racing. The door's broken. What did that even mean? And if the door was broken, why had I heard her moving around inside? Why hadn't she just said that when I first knocked? But what else was I going to do? I needed to deliver this pizza. That was my job. I walked around the side of the house, my shoes squelching in the wet grass. There was no overhang on this side, so I was getting absolutely drenched. Rain plastered my hair to my forehead and soaked through my work shirt. When I reached the side entrance, I stopped. The door there looked wrong, really wrong. It was old and weathered, sure, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was that it looked completely unused. There were cobwebs stretched across the frame, thick ones that had clearly been there for a while. Dirt and grime covered the door handle. The light fixture above it was broken, just an empty socket with no bulb. If the front door was really broken, wouldn't this door look like it had been used recently? Wouldn't the cobwebs be cleared away, the handle clean from people touching it? I stood there, pizza box in hand, getting absolutely soaked, and just stared at that door. I didn't hear any footsteps inside. No sound of anyone approaching to meet me. Nothing. The feeling was getting worse now, that creeping sensation of being watched. I couldn't see anyone, couldn't hear anyone, but I knew. I knew someone was out there in the darkness, watching me stand there like an idiot in the rain. I looked around, trying to pierce the shadows under the trees, but I couldn't see anything beyond what my phone's flashlight illuminated. The darkness felt thick, almost solid. And somewhere in that darkness, I was certain someone was staring at me. That's when my instincts finally kicked in. That little voice in the back of my head that had been whispering something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong finally got loud enough for me to listen. I dropped the pizza box right there on the ground and ran. I didn't look back, didn't try to be polite or call out an explanation. I just booked it around the house, across the front yard, and practically dove into my car. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. I peeled out of there, tires spinning on the wet driveway as I fled back toward the main road. My heart was hammering in my chest, and I kept checking my rearview mirror like something was going to come chasing after me. It wasn't until I was back on the main road with streetlights and other cars around me that I started to calm down enough to think clearly. And that's when I started piecing it together. The other pizza box. The soggy one from a different restaurant. What if another delivery driver had come here earlier? What if they'd had the exact same experience I just had? The dark house, the person who wouldn't answer the door, the instruction to go around to the side. What if they'd gotten freaked out and left just like I did? And then these people, whoever they were, they'd just ordered again from a different place. From my shop this time. They clearly didn't care about the pizza. Both boxes were left outside, getting ruined by the rain. They weren't ordering food because they were hungry. So why were they ordering it? The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became they were trying to lure someone to the side of the house. Away from the front, away from the driveway, away from anywhere visible from the road. No witnesses. In the darkness, in the rain, completely isolated. What were they planning to do? I never found out, and honestly, I don't want to know. I drove back to the shop, my hands still shaking. When I got there, I told my manager what happened, that the customer wouldn't come to the door and I left the pizza. I didn't mention the rest. I didn't want to sound crazy, and part of me was worried they'd think I was just making excuses for not completing the delivery. My manager just shrugged and marked it as undeliverable. Apparently it happens sometimes. I kept working at that pizza place for another year after that night. I delivered to a lot of weird houses, met a lot of strange people, dealt with plenty of uncomfortable situations. But nothing, and I mean nothing, ever came close to being as disturbing as that house with the 2 pizza boxes. Sometimes I think about it. I wonder if they ever caught whoever was doing that, or if they kept ordering pizzas from different places, waiting for a driver who wouldn't run away. I wonder what would have happened if I'd actually knocked on that side door, or if I'd been just a little less cautious. Mostly, though, I try not to think about it at all. I still work there, actually. Different position now, mostly working the ovens instead of delivering. The pay's about the same, and I don't have to drive around in the rain anymore. But every now and then, on Saturday nights when there's a storm and we're slammed with delivery orders, I watch the drivers head out into the darkness. And I hope, I really, really hope, that none of them ever get an order for that address, because I got lucky. I listened to my gut and I ran, but the next person might not.